Okay, I think you're all in the process of joining. We'll do some introductions before we get going while you all get situated. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Litera webinar with Artificial Lawyer. Myself, I am Richard Tromans, the founder of Artificial Lawyer, the legal tech website. We're going to be talking about a subject that is definitely a hot topic. It kind of goes on and off, but it's certainly getting extremely hot again, which is education and training in the world of AI. And as I was saying just off camera earlier, really it revolves around two key questions, which is how do we use AI to make good lawyers? And then once we've made those good lawyers, how do they use AI to do good legal work? What are the kind of training situations? What are the guardrails? What shouldn't they do? What should they do? Who takes responsibility? And so on. A lot of open-ended questions there. To help us explore those, we'll go around. With us, we've got a fantastic panel. We'll start off with Megan, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Megan. I run a research lab at Stanford Law School. It's called the Legal Innovation Through Frontier Technology Lab. It's quite the mouthful, so just call us the LIF Lab.
Fantastic. Patrick? Oh, you're on mute, Patrick.
There we go, classic start in any kind of tech panelist being on mute. But my name is Patrick Grant. I'm an associate professor of AI and technology at the University of Law. We're formerly the College of Law, and we train professional lawyers. Lovely to meet you all, and thanks so much for having me.
Fantastic. Josephine?
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Josie Kenny, and I'm the Director of Client Value and Innovation at Litera. So after many years as an M&A lawyer, I joined the Kira team, and we kind of brought AI to market for contract review. And now at Litera, I work with all of our kind of law firm clients and in-house corporate teams, thinking about embedding AI into their practices and all the training that goes along with that. And it's been exciting to work with the University of Law on educating some of their students through some of their programs there too. So definitely a topic that's very interesting.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And last but not least is Ken.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kenneth, and I'm a technology lawyer at BlackRock. I specialize in data protection with increasing work in the AI governance space, but also side of desk and outside of work. I played with various AI tools, and yeah, very much looking forward to a lively discussion.
Fantastic, fantastic. So we're, in terms of construction of this, we're going to start off with the baby lawyers, law school, law students. Then we're going to look at junior associates. Then we're going to work our way up to partners. Then we're going to look at the future. And then, of course, we'll be delighted to take your questions. About halfway through, I'll give you a bit of a nod. And if you want to start pushing your questions through, you may see at the top right-hand side of your screen a small box with a question mark. Don't send your questions yet. Give it about 15-30 minutes, and then we will get to those towards the final quarter. We're going to be doing a bunch of polls as well, and we'll be delighted to see your results. But let's just start off with a couple of one piece of research and one news story. So Berkeley Law, very respected law school out in California, has, as you've probably seen, banned the use of AI amongst its law students across a whole range of areas. But it's not a complete ban. That you can still use it for research, for example, but you're not allowed to use it for what you might call higher functions. You can't use it for brainstorming ideas about papers that you're writing, which is interesting. And a piece of research from Thomson Reuters, they did a big survey of thousands of students. They found that about 1/3 of law students are reporting that their law schools are not equipping them with the correct skills that they feel they need for the future around AI. And they reckon that around 57% are using AI on a regular basis in their work. We were just talking off camera, and we'll get to Patrick momentarily, that is probably a massive underreporting of reality. So let's start off with the beginning. So you've got to law school. There are two key aspects. One, you're using AI to help you in your studies. Two, you're looking ahead to when you become a lawyer and you're thinking, what do I need to learn to become a good lawyer in relation to AI? Patrick, let's just start off with you. What are you teaching students in London?
Well, what we're doing is working on three pillars. So basically, know the law. We don't think the foundation's really going to change that hugely. You know, lawyers' job is to guide people through a very sort of complicated system. it's to help them to navigate that, and also it's to explain really complex things in a really simple way to their clients, because otherwise they're probably not coming back. So our foundation is absolutely that: know the law, but we're embedding AI into our classes. So we're getting use of the tools, we're getting students to understand all of the sort of good points, bad points, failure modes, where it's going to be really useful. The second pillar is building AI literacy. So we've spent the last 18 months working really hard on a really structured pathway with certifications, and it all starts with a 4-hour Digital Education Council course on critical AI literacy. So what it is, what it's going, good, bad, and ugly, so on. And all of our students and staff are going to undertake that 4-hour course in the next 12 months. We think that's important because that means we're all part of the conversation. Staff can really help to guide things in an unsure world, but also it gives students the sort of confidence to actually understand the background of the tools they're using as things change. The third pillar is using the tools. And my vision for this is really simple. It's the idea that whatever law firms are using, I want my students to have hands-on structural understanding, certification, and actually proper learning around it. So when they walk into the workplace next year, 2 years' time, they've got that confidence to really deliver from day one.
Yeah, makes sense. We'll try to pick some of those points shortly. Just off camera, we were talking about statistics, and you said that it's like more like 98% of students using AI already.
Yes, so there was a one KG did a survey called The Secret Life of Students 2026 recently, and what they said that was really interesting is that it's 92% of students using AI, 88% are using it for assessed work, and 36% said that they've had some kind of formal training on it. So there's two really interesting gaps around that, I think. You know, the gap between how much they're using it and how well prepared they are to use it. But there's also that sort of behavioral bit underneath, isn't there, with the assessed work. So one of the interesting things that came out of the Secret Life of Students was this accountability moment. And I think this is really important in law firms as well. Broadly, what they worked out was that where there's no accountability moment within a module, students are much, much more likely to use AI for their assessments and probably not see the issues with it. But where you actually have to interrogate the output, there was the accountability moment they described. So, you know, another thing that we've got from that, I'm really concerned about that 36% and bringing them up. And that's what we're doing through our 3 pillars. But I think the assessment design drives AI behavior as well. So I think that's a really important one that we can pick up on too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? So basically, if it doesn't really matter that much, they're using AI, which is wrong message. But you know what really concerns me is the 8% who aren't using AI. You know, because they're going to walk into a law firm and like, what are they going to do? But let's go to Megan. So Megan, I mean, I know you're not teaching directly in perhaps the same way Patrick is, but if you do work at Stanford, you just give us a view of how you see these issues.
I think, you know, Stanford has taken the opposite approach. And so our law school, you know, directed by our dean, has made a really strong effort to make sure that every single person, from students all the way to faculty, in the same way that Pat just mentioned, is that we have to be using AI one way or another. The library has kind of had these workshops that they've opened up to everybody. There's an innovation hub and all of these different elements. Harvey Lagora, all of these different, you know, tools are widely available to everybody. So it's not, you know, only left to students or faculty or whatnot. Everybody is supposed to be using them. And then on top of that, a lot of the different research centers and labs, including mine, are actually building with these tools. We're thinking through questions about evaluation, for example. What's the difference between, you know, using one tool versus another, and then kind of doing these blind evaluations between humans and, you know, using these tools or them together. What are sort of the differences, and thinking through methodology, like, is there a reason why we use rubrics to assess quality of output versus preference ranking? So, you know, the decision between one versus another. And so I think that it's quite a holistic approach that we've gone through, because the idea is that one way or another, they're going to be exposed, whether or not they're doing it in the shadows or we're just being upright and out front with it. I think it makes more sense to just come forward and say, we're all going to be using it. It's going to be, you know, something actually fundamentally boring at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is we're going through such significant transformation that everybody is going to be using it going forward, that it's not going to be some shocking situation of innovation. It's truly going to be kind of embedded into our lives. And so we should probably already start tackling that. One thing that I will note is I think it's quite disappointing that, Berkeley has taken an approach about brainstorming in particular, because to me, the most exciting element about these tools is the alternative perspectives that they're generating for a student. The idea is that you can come in with a certain number of ideas, but a lot of these models, particularly Claude, are really good at giving sort of counter perspectives, giving some critical feedback. And so this particular element doesn't have anything to do with the execution of the work itself. It's kind of just starting to spark innovation or spark interesting ideas for the students. So that particular aspect, I think I would have dialed more heavily into it. But this is my opinion and not of the Stanford.
Well, actually, I think this is such an important point, and to some degree, it carries over into law firm work as well. How far should we allow junior lawyers to use AI tools, and for what for? I mean, Ken and Josephine, you were both lawyers. Well, you're still a lawyer, Ken. I mean, Josephine. I mean, I'm sure you use AI tools for brainstorming as well. I mean, what do you think? Do you think law students should be banned from brainstorming with AI?
No, and I think there's another element we kind of haven't touched on here. We're talking about law students needing to learn the law and what is the role of AI in that. But I think Megan's point is a good one, which you can't fundamentally ignore this, right? This is going to transform the practice as we know it from a business perspective too. So, if law students aren't exposed at this point, their readiness to be in a law firm is impacted too. I know at least the sessions that we've been doing with the University of Law, they're commercial awareness sessions. And I know when I was a baby lawyer, the commercial awareness sessions were about whatever was going on at the time that was going to have a big impact on the business. So what are the partners thinking about? What is kind of important for these law firms to be thinking about that you're going to bring to an interview? In today's market, that's AI. So, really bringing them on board with that and helping them understand the AI fundamentals and how it might transform the business is another part of the sort of training that is important, as well as the sort of legal training and their understanding of how to use it in practice for the work itself, but also just understanding the business impact, which I think is really important too.
Yeah, lots of good. In fact, we won't mention the name of the law firm because I understand that it's still in motion, but there are lots and lots of interesting stories at the moment about a large international law firm that got into trouble because a junior associate who wasn't, or may not have been, allegedly, supervised in the way that they were meant to have been supervised, ended up sending in a load of duff work, to put it simply. And the judge then got upset, contacted the firm, asked them to explain themselves. It then looks like allegedly the firm's junior associate then used AI again in a very sort of unsupervised way to produce a response, which the judge absolutely lost it at that point and said, this is just getting worse and worse. So it goes to Megan's point that it's not really it's not like we're introducing students to AI, and as Paddy said, like they're all using it anyway. It's more about how do they effectively use it, how do they determine what is a good result, how to understand what a good result looks like, and so forth. I mean, Ken, when you were a junior lawyer, would you have liked to be able to brainstorm?
Yeah, drawing upon what everyone else is saying, I think so. The brainstorming point is quite an interesting one because, yes, on the one hand, it probably gives you a couple of cognitive outputs that maybe you wouldn't have considered before. But at the risk of sounding a little bit more on the Luddite side of the scale in the panel, I do worry about I think we talked about this before, Richard, in terms of the risk of cognitive atrophy that you risk exposing yourself to early on in your career. And I don't think that's trivial. There's quite a lot of literature in relation to the use of AI tools that speaks to this idea that it gives you a false sense of your own proficiency. And I think when you're a junior lawyer,
you haven't thought through those issues yourself, so you haven't really developed the mental muscles.
Correct,
but that's the argument.
But to use a blunt analogy, you don't become a F1 driver just using the car alone. There's a lot of judgment and knowledge about what goes under the hood and working together as part of a team that makes you that proficient professional. And I think, so on the one hand, there are lots of opportunities for you to develop cognitive muscles as a junior lawyer that use of AI tools, I do worry, kind of takes away your conception of what good looks like. But I think there's, and maybe this is me becoming old and nostalgic and wistful, but I think there's also a sense that because when I look back at my career, there was a lot of zigzagging that landed me in the end in the place that I am now. And I think a lot of the early process of that is not just what you learn, it's you kind of dip into what you truly believe about the profession and about the work that you do. And if you're spoon-fed, I mean, not to be too untoward about these tools, but if you're spoon-fed insights that are not your own, I do question whether the next generation of lawyers are going to develop that in a meaningful way. And for me, that's important not just for the output that you produce, but it's important for the profession overall.
Fair points. Megan?
I might push back on that a little bit, just because I think there are different ways of using a lot of these tools. And I think what you're pointing to is what I call the execution versus kind of the other element, which is how do you actually use AI to, create an environment where you're learning the legal skills. And so a lot of what I noticed early on with these models is that they're very, very good at role playing. And one of the projects one of the things, I have a 9-month-old at home, we often kind of role play different things, but early on you can say things like, oh, explain this to me like a pirate. And it's pretty good at doing that. And so one of the projects that we have going on is what I call legal personas, which is the ability to have the AI models behave like partners at a law firm. And so it's kind of creating an environment where you're scaling almost this apprenticeship model that already exists. And we have this methodology that's derived from other CS researchers where you can do a 2-hour interview and then take that interview and pipe it into the model. And the model does what I call the method acting, and it kind of embodies itself in this partner. And so what we do is we kind of think about using sort of these legal AI personas to train and to give sort of alternative perspectives. And so rather than saying, hey, use this tool to just execute the work, I know that there's a lot of sort of these models or other platforms, the more legally AI specific platforms that are focused on the execution again of the work. But if you use kind of these AI models, maybe ones that embody senior partners, you're kind of having a partner in your pocket. And so you then still preserve those real human moments where you can go to your senior partners, or your associates can go to you, Ken, and say, hey, maybe they're more optimized in their questions because, you don't really have a lot of safe spaces to fail, so to speak, in the legal space. So you can kind of go and workshop a lot of these ideas and then kind of use your human one-on-one time to really figure out what is it that you don't know. So I think yes, we certainly are worried about cognitive offloading, but I think what should be surfaced is that a lot of these AI tools are capable of the learning component. We just haven't tapped into it very well. And so if we continue to sort of dwell in this space where we're really worried that it's executing work on top of kind of what associates are doing or what law students are doing, we kind of take away from these moments that I think, could be really helpful for the education side.
Yeah, and it goes back to your other point, Megan, about using tools, whichever name brand, we all know the brands. It's not so much about, hey, here's X, here how to use it, because they're pretty intuitive, right? It's more about how to use your own judgment in using those tools, and perhaps it's the same with legal education. But we almost need like these 4-hour classes are not how to use AI. But it's rather about how to approach the use of AI so that you protect the things that matter whilst developing new things that you didn't know perhaps were possible. We could keep going on this, and I think we'll probably come back to it a little bit with the associate level. But just to wrap up, let's just do, because we're moving into the associates now, the associate part of all of this. Kim, or the Litera team, could you put up the first poll, please? So this is obviously, we're now at the end of law school. They've passed their exams. They've got a job, hopefully. When new associates join your firm today, how AI ready are they on day one? Very ready. They hit the ground running. Somewhat ready. They understand the tools, but need more work. underprepared, they lack practical confidence, not ready at all. We're building AI literacy from scratch. So we've got one vote. Please go ahead and vote, everybody.
It's quite cool you can see it in real time. I wasn't expecting that.
No one has said very ready yet, which is interesting. Big opportunity for law schools here. Give you another couple of minutes. I know we've got, I think we had about 400 sign up, but maybe people are being a bit shy. Of course, not everybody works at a law firm. So, or if they are at a law firm, may not be in a position to make such a judgment. So, okay, I think we're slowing down. All right, so the overall view, just by a little bit, is that you're somewhat ready. You understand the tools, good, but you need more work. I think that's what it says. Underprepared, lack practical confidence, which is an interesting point. I should go back to Megan on this, because I know that you were talking about building tools. Do you think they lack practical confidence because it's presumably not because they don't understand the mechanics of the tools? I said they're pretty intuitive. Is it because they don't know enough about real legal work? They never worked in a real law firm, on a real client matter, so they don't really know how to apply these things?
I think you're right, Richard, that part of the confidence problem is that there really aren't that many spaces in legal practice that allow you to fail forward, so to speak. The hardest lessons that you're going to feel are the ones where, a partner is really going to come down on you for doing that, or, think mistakes that you just can't undo. And those are the ones that you're going to think about and keep you up at night for a couple weeks. And then ones that you think back on. And, the benefit of it is that it does kind of affect your judgment and you will kind of make certain strategic moves going forward. But, because we don't have those spaces, you're going to feel extra cautious about whether or not you can use AI. So I know that at least the law students at Stanford, many of them already don't use AI because they're worried entirely about the consequences of using them. And so we naturally already are finding ways in which we can get them to start building those muscles. I always kind of share the story that the biggest power user I know is my own mother. And she is a retired woman in her 70s that has no business using it, but she's actually one of the most expert users I know. So I think when you don't have a space where you can feel like you can confidently and fail and make mistakes and not feel punished for it, you're going to always be in a space where you might use it incorrectly. And again, I think this goes back to the point of where I think it's really important as educators to be nudging and encouraging ways of using AI in a safe environment.
Yeah,
I think, Richard, if I could come in on this,
Please.
I think it's a very interesting dynamic I've seen between my friends who trained as lawyers and my friends who trained as engineers, and also to tie those two together. I think a lot of the future of reaping the fruits of what AI can do in the legal space is less on just augmenting your current work, but rather building tools that are bespoke to your existing work streams with a level of confidence that also ties to your institutional or your professional knowledge. And I think as a lawyer, as a junior lawyer or otherwise, you're raised in a very odd psychological space because you're very competitive, but you're also very risk averse. And in my estimation, engineers are actually quite the opposite. And actually, I feel like one part of the profession that is still burgeoning is an intersection between the two, where you are actually in-house or otherwise, you're tasked with building kind of systematized, automated workflows around certain work streams. But most large law firms, most large companies, the culture is not as such for you as a lawyer, in-house or otherwise, to play in that sandbox. So as much as it's a confidence thing, I think it's also kind of willing to be the black sheep of the family and actually give it a go, fall on your face, and do a bunch of things that culturally as lawyers you're not trained to dip into. And I think that's the fascinating thing is, drawing upon the same poll that you and Patty were referring to, one thing that does excite me is how there's a bunch of younger lawyers who are quite willing to flip that zeitgeist on its head and actually we might see some very interesting developments in that regard. But I think it's probably, if I had to put a finger in the air, it'd probably be more of a bottom-up approach than anything that we can expect top-down for the time being. Purely because of the nature of the product.
Ken, what about your day job? I mean, you work
Yep.
Blackstone, you said. I mean, do they give you time to experiment? Do they say, hey, Ken, hey, we're Blackstone. In fact, we're big investors in a million
BlackRock,
different...
yeah.
They're also...
No.
I mean, but do they say
Either
to
or.
you, like, we want you to go off and experiment?
Yeah, I mean, BlackRock have been very good about. So we use Copilot Enterprise in the firm, and like there's a lot of kind of high level encouragement in relation to the same. But I think implementing something that is scalable, useful, actually has value is quite a tall ask if you've never done it before. And I've experimented with various iterations of this both inside and outside of work. But it's almost like being given the toolkit to be a rocket engineer when you've never done it before. It's very exciting. It's very kind of tangible, and you can see the outcome in terms of where you want to be. But the actual skill set of putting it together in a way that it actually flies is actually, and I think drawing on my previous kind of talking point, which I appreciated Megan's pushback. I actually agree with a lot of the stuff she inputted into that. But I think what AI tools currently are very good at is going from 0 to 1, but actually creating scalable tools that you can actually implement in your day-to-day. That still requires high-level expertise in the same way you'd require high-level expertise in reviewing a contract properly, etc.
But that sounds like more like a managerial issue. Well, we're going slightly off subject, but I suppose, I mean, just one point.
I think it could be. It's I think it's fair.
Gets on top of that, or brings in forward deployed engineers from a company, consultancy. You could do this.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think it's just a big unknown at this point in time, because the other thing is building, let's say, an app that allows you to have I'm trying to think of some trivia that allows you to present a filter that puts a cat's face on you. It's probably a lot easier than actually having a document review tool that actually does what it says on the can. So I think part of it is definitely resources and kind of cultural input from a managerial level, but there also has to be an appetite to actually use these things. And it's not all, I mean, case in point, I was talking to another friend about this. The first mover advantage that Microsoft Word has enjoyed within the legal community is not based purely on how much we love to use Microsoft Word. So I think it's usually a lot complicated than we give it credit for, but it's also an invitation for everyone to play in the sandbox.
No, fair enough. And Josephine, I mean, obviously, so you were a lawyer, now you work at a tech company. I mean, when you meet the junior lawyers, many of which are going to be using some of the tools inside Litera, like Kira, for example, I mean, where are they on the journey, and what do they need to learn?
Yeah, I mean, we did a survey of a bunch of associates to kind of get a sense of that, what is their experience today? What are they getting from the tools, and what more do they need? And they shared with us that it's taking them 1 to 2 years to move from just finding things in contracts to substantive analysis. So when we think then about the sort of power that the tools can bring in terms of training, it's really expediting that process, because as you say, something like Kira that is going to find the risky clauses for you, that's now surfacing maybe 2 years worth of experience. I mean, in my experience in practice, you've got to wait for the deals to come along, right? And you've got to wait for that volume and see those clauses again and again to get that learning. Well, if that is being surfaced to you, can we really shorten that time frame to get to the substantive analysis and really the kind of deep work that I know all of us know that the lawyers ultimately want to do? But I think Megan's point around the coaching and role play in that is really important. And actually, those associates said they're getting less than an hour of partner time in kind of coaching
per week.
Per week. Yeah.
Per career. Or...
Yeah, per week. But that kind of idea of needing that osmosis, that role play, like having that sort of interaction. And they're saying, 94% of them said that's the most important thing to me. So if we can kind of couple the capabilities of these AI tools, surely we're going to come off better. You're surfacing all the data, that's going to be in front of them. They're suddenly able to absorb all of that without needing to wait for the deals to come along. Then think about some of the cool stuff Megan's doing with role plays and building kind of simulators. If we can bring those together, we are really bringing a lot to the associates to help them. But I agree with Ken. Overall, the need for kind of time and space in a law firm is definitely a business change. We did a panel kind of taking us out of the law firm context, thinking about in-house teams. We did a panel with a bunch of GCs, including our HG, our investors. And they said they, you know, in an offsite now will create time and space, pure playtime for people to go off and use AI tools and think about things. So I think that space needs to be created for the lawyers to feel that they can kind of really lean in, especially at the associate level, to some of these learnings and some of these opportunities.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was on a webinar with someone else, with a couple of people from Oric, and they were saying that the as far as I understand, that very first wave of juniors who come in, there's a significant amount of their time is not billable. They have to account for what they're doing, obviously, but they're not expected to actually generate any income from that time, because it's understood that a lot of it is effectively training, and they're going to be bringing the legal and the AI bit together, which is really nice, because they haven't like resorted to sort of, you know, things where, you know, you used to get these things called like innovation hours, where you were given like 1 hour a week where you could do something around technology and you could count it towards your billable targets. But they're just literally like swathes and swathes of hours, just like as much as you need, because once you're up and running, it's all going to get paid back 10,000-fold. But Megan, well, you were mentioned multiple times in the last 10 minutes, so let's go back to you, Megan, just more comments on all of those bits. And then I want to bring in the point about how do we develop judgments, because I think this connects to that.
Sure. So, I mean, I can touch upon some of the simulation work that we've done that dials in on the role play. So we have a couple of projects, a very early one that we recently ran this randomized control trial with Deckard, where it's called Deal Mentor. And basically the idea is that it's a negotiation simulation where there are multi-agents. There are agents that play, you know, the client. There's agents that play, you know, the client on the other side, the opposing counsel, and then there's a whole suite of sort of these specialist attorneys that you can bring in. Just like how, you know, any complex transactions, you might want to bring in some experts on both sides. And the whole goal is not just to teach basically, you know, how do you just negotiate more broadly some of these complex terms, but the other side of being resourceful, so, and as well as, you know, figuring out what client expectations are. These are all skills that I think you build in later in your career as you kind of transition from first and second year associate. One of the things that we hear often is, you know, I went to law school and I came in thinking, you know, I have all these critical analytical skills that I've been armed with. And now that I've been thrown into practice, it seems to me just grunt work after grunt work. And then kind of in hindsight, you think fondly and say, actually, it's all of these different micro steps that led to this particular judgment. Our hope with simulation is that we create high stakes environments high stakes scenarios in low stakes environments so that you can connect the dots very early on. Even if you are doing a task that seems a little bit more menial, you can get the experience of what it's like to be on deals. You know, to JC's point, you know, a lot of the deal flow is it ebbs and flows, right? You might not be on certain cases simply because partners, you know, might not have built the confidence for you to come on this particular deal yet. And so again, doing these scenarios, you can actually kind of fill in these hypotheticals and kind of realize that, oh, like I have now this experience. A lot of people say with gameplay, even if it's not real, it codifies in you kind of when you've made a mistake and what you can do to move forward. And so we have this randomized control trial in there. We ran a competition, and basically at the very end, there was a blind evaluation between the groups that had access to Deal Mentor and those that didn't. And the result was that we had 4 finalists, and 3 of the 4 were actually using Deal Mentor. And the one that was not, that to me is my favorite moment, which is it became a talent identifier. This person that was in the control group was actually kind of not from a tier 1 law school. They also were known to be timid and shy, but they actually were some of the most wicked negotiators. They actually threw curveballs that partners said, I haven't seen this in a junior, let alone a summer. So these were summer associates. And more importantly, it was someone that was throwing a curveball so aggressively that the partner said, this associate better be on my team going forward. And so to me, I think like simulation does way more than just training. It does it for strategy. So some of the partners that we worked with, they used it on live deals. Of course, they didn't get to the granularity of the deal and the client at hand, but they got to workshop 6 or 7 methods. The thing that was most exciting, as I mentioned, was that it also became a talent identifier. It helps, maybe if you're hiring, you can hire for skills that you would have had to kind of be drip fed and got to know certain associates over time to be able to figure out. Here you can actually build simulations that test around those specific skills and figure out ways of picking out associates that might be better for your team or organize your teams in a more efficient way. And so, yes, I'm very excited about the simulation idea, but that's really because I think that this could be how you remediate some of the ways that the volumes of work that are used to train associates that will go away. If that kind of goes away, then how are you going to train those associates? The other side of it is a lot of the training right now is fixated on kind of the top-down approach where you have playbooks that you give to associates and they're sort of by osmosis trying to figure it out. There's also the other method where you're sort of going through very slow drip fed experiences, and that's why it takes so long. Now you can kind of accelerate a lot of that just by doing it in multiple turns. The other exciting thing about it is that the randomness component and non-determinism of large language models plays to your benefit because you can play the same module and it actually plays it differently every time because there is this element of randomness. And so to me, simulation captures all of the positive qualities of large language models. And because it's an environment that's not dependent on execution of work to be delivered to clients, you actually don't have the same risks if these models make mistakes. And in fact, actually hallucinations in these kind of simulations, it affects the personality. And so we've actually had experiences where the clients that were played on top of models like Claude or GPT had differences, and you can get, stickier clients, you can get more aggressive clients, and we've been able to kind of change the personalities on all of them. So that's a very long spiel to just say I'm very, very excited about the promise of simulation, and I think that that's one area that to me could complement a lot of what's happening with some of those more execution AI tools.
Yeah. I mean, it's great stuff. And one other point, I was just thinking, I remember hearing, from a lot of junior associates that because they live in this brutal hours-based culture, you advance up the pyramid because you're someone who's always around. You're always in the office. You never go home. You're always available to get thrown onto a deal. You work incredibly long hours. You won't complain. But effectively, what you're just doing is tons and tons of grunt work. And whereas some other people, it's not binary, it may not, it's not an either or, but in some cases, there'll be very, very, very good proto lawyers who will not want to do that endless grunt work for 3 or 4 years and will leave the profession, create a legal tech company, something else. But if they've been able to go the simulation path and also be able to show those simulation results to the partners would have said, well, look, it is true, they don't clock as many billable hours or whatever as anybody else, but my God, they're really perceptive. And I've never paid much attention to this person because they're not around as much as the other ones, or they don't appear to be. They're not as loud. They're quieter at the back, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'll throw that open. That's really interesting. Generally, any thoughts, guys? Josephine?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall kind of work that Megan's doing, I think illustrates a lot of the potential there. I think firms still have a long way to go in terms of making the business changes, right, to facilitate some of this. And I think there's a lot that's inherent in the structure of a law firm that needs to be adjusted to facilitate a lot of this. So I think we're going to move on to kind of talking about the partners a little bit next.
Momentarily, yeah.
So I think that's a key element here.
Yeah, no, totally. But I was just thinking, I mean, every legal tech company out there should be creating their own virtual lessons effectively, or some kind of format. I mean, they, if you've got like about 2 billion in funding, you could probably build out some simulators as well.
Yeah, I think that's a strong argument for bringing the two together. I was just on a call before this, and it felt very timely, knowing that we were doing this webinar right after, where we were showing a new capability that exists in our platform, whereby when you're drafting and you're in Word, you can surface precedent data on the right-hand side as you're working through. Now, the feedback was, I'd love to have that precedent data, but how about the training tips or the context, or I use this when, and that kind of additional element of kind of personal training or guidance alongside the data really being the holy grail. And the concern there, if it's just the pure data without that training element or that training flavor, it's going to be hard for the associates to know how to use it and which way to use it. So I definitely think there's room for feeding in training type tips and guidance as this data is surfaced to lawyers, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, just to wrap up the whole, students to associate bit. I mean, it seems to me that AI is out there, it's everywhere, everybody's using it, and regardless of what anyone says in the survey, everyone's using it for pretty much everything they can. What's lacking, it seems, from everyone's points of views and experiences, is that there's a real lack of sophistication generally in the way that the legal market is using AI. It seems to be there's a tendency towards well, okay, our associates have access to X tool, or whatever. They're not really taking it all the way through the entire journey. But hopefully they will, which is understandable. Let's face it, ChatGPT arrived in November 2022. A lot of law firms are still in the process of bringing on various AI platforms of different types. It's still early days, incredibly. All right, let's look at partners. Jesse, we'll come back to you. We'll kick it around the group. We tended to think about AI and training in terms of junior lawyers, but that's really not just the case, is it? We've got everybody else in the firm, the older partners, the older lawyers.
Yeah, quite important, the partners in all of this, I think.
They own the business, so
yeah. And much like you were describing, Richard, there around this concept of innovation hours. I know a firm, and they've got, each of their partners kind of has 500 hours AI credit for their partners, and there is definitely this kind of need to incentivize those partners to also be driving the change top down, and maybe that's with similar things as they've done with the associates. I know you reported on the report that we kind of did that looked at actually how much of this is being driven by the clients, which of course is hitting the partners directly, and if over half of the partners' clients are really pushing them to use or select a certain AI tool, then that's obviously having an influence. So the partners are being or encouraged from all angles, right? When you think,
but Jesse, is it? I mean, let's talk about Litera, but all legal tech in general. But is this just ending up as a marketing conversation? It's like it's a technology. It's basically disguised as a very sophisticated technology conversation, but really it's just marketing. They're just trying to put on the right image.
There's a huge element of the law firm business that is marketing, right? Winning business and going out there and doing that. I'd really like, with the partner piece, to distinguish what we're talking about when we're talking about partners using AI, because I think a lot of this conversation, at least a lot of the conversation that I see online and on LinkedIn, is about, as Megan put it, execution or the practice elements being done with AI. But when I think about the partners and the conversations I have with partners, all of that drudgery, finding the risky clauses, working through, getting better at negotiation, that's not where they need to be spending their AI hours if they've been allocated those. There is a whole universe of AI products that are for partners in terms of business development. We have a proactive relationship management tool that will bring signals to the partners to say, did you know that your client just has hired a new GC? And those are the AI tools that I think the partners should really be focused on and spending their time kind of considering, because yes, there is a kind of overall importance of client service in the practice and the delivery of the work product. But really what I've seen partners get excited about is AI tooling that is helping them with their business, their book of business, and driving more revenue. And I think there's that whole world of tooling too, and that should be a big focus for the partners.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The operational data, which teams worked on which projects, what was the, the profit margin on this, who was on the other side of a deal that was similar to this, and so forth. What was the price of the matter? Absolutely. But although there is one point, and it goes back to this story, we won't mention the name of the firm again, which got into trouble because the senior lawyers allegedly were not supervising a junior lawyer who was using AI incorrectly. And I guess perhaps one of the points is, if you're a senior lawyer, you don't use AI tools very much. Maybe you use one of them and you use the prompt window to pop in a couple of prompts. You've redrafted a couple of client letters, but that's basically it. And you're getting work products from down below, lower down the pyramid. If you haven't really used AI tools yourself in detail and understand the subtleties of their answers and perhaps the differences between, different general models and legal tech tools and so forth, if you don't understand those subtleties, can you supervise the work anymore? Because, if I'm an equity partner, let's say it's 1999, everyone below me is operating pretty much the same way that I grew up. Right now, I'm an equity partner in 2026, and the junior lawyers are operating in a way that is completely alien in many ways to the way that I practiced. Right. Question is, do we need to actually make sure that the senior lawyers are properly trained so that they can become actual regulated supervisors? Because you could argue, okay, wild point, everybody, if the SRA is listening, or the American Bar Association, can you ethically regulate a junior lawyer if you do not actually understand the technology they're using? Megan, I'm going to ask you, what do you think?
I think there's a strong point to it. One thing is that Anthropic released a paper not too long ago about how one of the ways in which, to Ken's point, like when you're coding and how do you train sort of a young software engineer, one of the things that they recommended was actually for you to use sort of these coding agents to execute the work, but also ask the coding agent to explain it so that you see all the notes in between. And so maybe it's a question of almost reframing the vocabulary, where rather than just productivity and efficiency, we're actually talking about sort of these other skills of the learning. So you're watching the audits themselves. And so maybe, there's a sense of the same with partners, where they need to learn how the tools have sort of these auditing capabilities. And so a lot of, what people define as productivity tools today, like Claude Cowork or Claude Code, they actually all have things that are called the planning mode, and all of these things that are sort of the notes in between for you to query. I think to your point, yes, I think partners should be well versed in these tools as well, but well versed in ways in which you can tap into almost, again, this auditing mode to it. I think a lot of our research shows that partners are actually pretty good at figuring out quality between two work products. And so if you just ask them, here's version A, here's version B, tell me which one is better, they can do that in a matter of seconds, even in minutes longest. But if you ask them, here's a rubric, for example, of what should be in the product or in the sort of work product, they actually have a much harder time. And so maybe it's a way of kind of delivering the work, so to speak, to a partner as well, that will help them kind of determine what are sort of the different kind of granular things that they should look for, rather than saying okay, now the work product should unearth XYZ insights. Maybe that rubric kind of sense of determining quality is much harder. And so again, if you just kind of tell the partner, make sure that you look for things that are intended to be delivered to the client at a certain level of quality, that's probably enough to maybe help them figure out what's the kind of these sticking points that they need to look out for.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it feels to me like again and again the point keeps coming through very strongly that we're missing the management layer. I don't know, it doesn't necessarily have to be physically managed, but that higher level sophistication, that sort of top-down view, where you can make higher level decisions around the things that are going under you, on a productivity side. And I think that's really what's missing. We've been so focused on getting X tool into Y law firm and rolling it out and showing, 5 prompts per week per person, and then celebrating it and everyone winning a great big gold prize because they've managed to do that. And actually thinking about, well, what are the end results here? And, how is it actually affecting the entire system? Because that's one thing, people criticize Big Law, but Big Law is actually very good at managing what it does generally. But the AI has really just changed the game in a way that I think a lot of people still haven't started to sort of realize. Amazingly, we're zooming through this, got about 10 minutes left. If you do have questions, please ping them into the question box. You'll see on the right-hand side, up at the top, there's a little question mark in a little square. If you do have a question, please ping it to us and then press send, and we'll be delighted to answer it. But while you're thinking of questions, let's just look at the future then. So we've got about 10 minutes, 9 minutes left, looking forwards. So Ken, we've all just just explored a whole bunch of different points, but I mean, from what you were saying, it sounds like this management layer doesn't really exist where you are anyway, working in-house. That you're familiar with these AI tools, but you don't feel that you can do much with them on your own. I mean, just looking forward, where do we you don't have to talk specifically about your own, the company you're at, but
Sure.
I mean, where are we going to head? Because we haven't got. The truth is, we haven't actually got very far, have we?
No, and I should kind of slowly close some of the doors to hell that are ajar and say the management at BlackRock. I mean, it's not necessarily the management layer is missing as such, but the nature of AI tooling is such that it is by definition decentralized disruption. It allows individuals at a very granular level to bespoke the way they're implementing these tools to their day-to-day, to their own insights, towards their own work streams. But equally by definition, it's very hard to develop a coherent strategy around that, whether that's risk or outcomes or whatever. And to your point, Richard, I don't think this is unique to any one organization. I think the legal industry and industry as a whole, yeah, absolutely. I think we're all kind of figuring out where these technologies fit within the wider ecosystem of value propositions. And I think that's true of knowledge work as a whole. I think the key kind of framing question in my mind is, are we developing the next generation of lawyers to technologically augment what we've already seen before? And to your point, if you're a partner in 1999, are the juniors that are coming up now, are they going to be partners with some AI attached? Or are we going to see something that fundamentally dissolves some of the nature of what we do as knowledge workers in the legal space? And maybe we're going to see something in between where it's more of a hybrid model. It's very interesting just hearing all these discussions about partners overseeing juniors using AI tools. A friend who's an engineer, quite a mild-mannered question, but basically asked, are we getting to the point, or could we get to the point where the person what you're actually supervising is the AI tooling as managed by the trainee or as managed by the junior associate?
Yeah.
And in that respect, I think that's kind of a gateway drug to think about different aspects of delivering the value proposition of legal services through a technological means.
Is that a bad thing if it services society?
We don't know. Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everyone outside of the profession will have dry eyes thinking about the end of lawyers. But I have to admit, when I say I don't know, I generally don't know, because for all the jokes made about lawyers, there is something very unique about the profession where you are kind of, a lot of the time, no matter what sector you work in, you're paid to be the adult in the room in a way that's kind of separated from whatever the commercial or policy or whatever outcome is that everyone else is chasing. And maybe I'm being wistful and a little bit old here, but I do think there's value in that, both from a professional standpoint and a societal one. And if all that happens is that becomes augmented into a technological system that we are, risk-based engineers overseeing, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, I don't know, but that definitely has dystopian vibes in a way that I'm not necessarily comfortable with wholesale rubber stamping.
No. Well, I mean, we luckily we haven't even got that far yet, so I won't worry too much. Patrick, I mean, what's where are we heading? You know, you're the custodian of the next generation of lawyers. So where are we heading?
It's one I'm torn on, Richard, to be absolutely honest with you, because I think, you know, my job at the University of Law, I don't just train commercial lawyers, it's high street practitioners, it's criminal lawyers, it's all these different types of things. And I think that lawyers have always worked it out somehow, haven't they? You know, you go back to Adams and Lindsell and you look at the sort of postal rule, right? And after the postal rule came the telegram came the telegraph, after the telegraph came the internet, the fax machine. We've always managed to work it out. We've always managed to go back to first principles and go, well, this is what we're here to do. This is how we're going to help. And we've always managed to sort of move forward and work it out. I think there's two things that I'm really interested in seeing where we go to in the future. I think number one, we just need to twist the AI influence around and go, actually, it's our choices as a legal system where we head to with this technology, how we use these tools to better help people navigate a system that they're going to get stuck in, or to better help people to understand their rights, responsibilities, the law, all this kind of thing. But I also think that, you know, going back to the earlier point, we need to bring everyone along for the ride. And that's it. You know, you were just talking about the sort of managing partners at firms. And in many ways, I've got a lot of sympathy for them, because it's this sort of role-based training that's required, isn't it? If you were like your sort of imaginary partner of 1999, well, you've been through all the legal tech and sort of Susskind dramas that we've been through over the last 26 years, where every time a new tool came out, that was it for lawyers. That's the absolute end.
Yeah,
We've got through that. We've got further. So I really think everyone just needs a bit of a break, sort of sit back from it, get trained in it, get trained in the right roles, understand how your role and your understanding of AI is going to influence the future, and actually just flip it on its head and say, how's this tool going to help us to become even better in the future?
Yeah. So I think Patrick and Ken, you're lawyer nativists, basically. You know, the lawyer is preeminent, and
Yes.
AI sits around there. Josephine,
Don't think I've ever been called that before, Richard, but I'll take it.
well, yeah, I mean, because you know you've got AI first and AI native law firm, so it's kind of logical. Josephine, and then we'll finish. Megan, you get last word. So Josephine,
Yeah, I think with everything going on, I'm envious of anyone who's able to make a prediction and get it right. And I think anyone who is hopefully making a lot of money or having a good time. But it's so hard, right, to look at the future and really understand what the potential is when things are moving this quickly. So yeah, lots of opportunity. And I think we've only just scratched the surface. I think the real business changes are going to bring the most opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, and ultimately, you know, there are strong financial elements to this. You know, whether even if you're a criminal lawyer, you know, even if your income is paid by legal aid, you know, the government obviously is trying to cut the legal aid bill, or at least make it go further. You know, the Ministry of Justice in the UK is desperately trying to accelerate the number of trials that can take place. So, and why are these things the way they are? One of them is economic reasons. So, you know, the AI does absolutely play into all of that. So, Megan, I mean, where do you see things heading?
I think we might head into a space where, to your point, Richard, that we all just become better managers. I think a lot of what we're starting to realize is there's a transition between AI perceived as a tool to AI perceived as like a machine colleague, so to speak. And so if we have perceivably this new AI workforce that is integrating with our law firms, our in-house counsel, how do we actually train our associates, our law students to all be much more discerning, all to build that judgment from day one. And it's a complicated task. Actually, some of our research that we're thinking about is, can we reverse engineer all of the different cognitive skill sets of each particular legal task, so that you don't have to be drip fed that through sort of years and years of grunt work or experience. And so those are some of the things that I think about a lot, is like, how do we transition into this human machine collaboration, a sort of new structure where, you know, things are hand in hand. And I know it could be dystopian to sort of Ken's point, but I don't think that actually lawyers are going to become sort of the risk averse engineers. I think what we're moving into is attorneys attorneys becoming strategy drivers, and that being sort of a much more positive future, hopefully, is that they're not the ones that are going to be the bottleneck, right? Because they're so risk averse, because they cannot necessarily see all of the kind of universe of insights that maybe the AI agents act as kind of, these are sort of the different elements that you can factor in addition to your own experience that you're building. And then in this case, you're sort of creating a new vision, maybe helping sort of firms and companies kind of help drive sort of what should be the next step. So yeah, so I think maybe for me, I could be overly optimistic, but I think there's going to be a space for this human AI collaboration.
And Richard, I don't know if you're seeing everyone else's predictions in the question. Not so many questions, but lots of people have exciting views on this.
Where are the questions?
Just next to the chat, there's people have lots of different and a few questions in there, which maybe we won't have time for, but we can always.
I can't see any questions because I was hoping to answer to ask you their questions, the audience's questions. I can't see any questions. It says no questions yet. Can you see any questions?
I can see a few. One was just asking what metrics, like how are we really kind of tracking all of this? I suppose we've talked a lot about ideas and concepts, but practically how law firms are tracking it.
Wow, that's a big one. The questions. Thank you, people. I thought you were all being incredibly shy. Tim, I'm guessing that you've got to chuck us off because we're burning the electricity bill. But okay, can you all hang on for 5 minutes, everybody? We're going to do like a speed question round. All right. Okay, Megan, I'm going to pick the people, and you have to do it in one sentence. So, Megan, how do we do metrics for legal AI training?
You do blind evaluations and figure out sort of how lawyers evaluate each other historically, and then use those to evaluate AI.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, somebody says, I've been training lawyers for 20 years and I have not seen critical thinking or use of databases really improve during that period. How can you expect lawyers to show good judgment when it comes to the use of AI? Fair question. Anybody want to take that?
I think that remains one of the hardest challenges and one of those business changes that needs to happen for all of these tools to be effective, really solving for some of the data silos and things and structures that exist in the law firm that are barriers to some of these tools being effective is something that is definitely a big ongoing challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Yeah, which is, I think that connects with what we were talking about, the management layer, which is a point about if we can't really frame the problems that we're trying to solve, if we can't articulate them, then you can't figure out anything else afterwards. So you can't really talk about ROI or anything else down the line, any downstream effects, if you can't really sort of on a more sophisticated top-down level explain what it is that you're trying to achieve. If the goal is to get AI into law firms and in-house teams, then I think we've been pretty successful, everybody. I think we can all pat ourselves on the back. We've achieved that, but what are we actually trying to achieve from doing that? And I think we're going to have to do another webinar, but we will have to do another webinar anyway. But thank you for your questions, everybody. We have recorded this, and so if you want to replay it on the beach at the weekend, you'll be able to. I'm actually on holiday, but I've come out especially just for this, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much to our panel, to Megan, Josephine, Ken, and Patrick. And as mentioned, there will be a recording of this, so if your colleagues would like to see it, they'll be able to. And without further ado, just look out for the next Litera webinar, and thank you to everyone. Goodbye.